Welcome back, modifiers. Right, we've got the beamer out. If you follow my channel, then you probably know that we're restoring a beamer, so we've pulled that out. And in comes this Honda Accord Euro R, and it needs a new clutch. So we're doing a clutch kit, and I thought I'd show you how we're doing it, hopefully without having to remove the entire subframe. So let's get into it. With the car jacked up and the wheels off, everything nice and safe, make sure you know what you're doing, all of that jazz. We need to get this large nut off here, and maybe a little bit tight because it's got a small piece of metal that is most likely banged over to stop the nut from moving, but any impact gun will just pull that right off. These are 36mm nuts. Make sure you keep your parts in buckets that are relative to parts of the car. So I've got left and right, and then I'll have a gearbox one. So next we need to pop off this steering ball joint here. So I'm going to take out the clip and undo that castle nut underneath, and I will separate the ball joint with the ball joint separator. Same with underneath here on this bottom ball joint. Same again, pull the pin out, take the castle nut off, and then separate it with the ball joint separator. You need quite a big ball joint separator for this bottom one, because that's quite a butty ball joint. This one you could probably even use a fork. The easiest way I find to get these split pins out is straighten up the pins, and then just mole grips on the back side, and just tap that set of mole grips out and see if it works. There we go. That's the pin out. Make sure you don't lose it. I'll put new ones in. Tap that out. There's the pin. Nice and easy. Standard ball joint separator. This goes on like that. Make sure you get the bottom lined up. Just start doing it right. There we go. That's the steering arm off. Bottom one's a little bit tougher. It's a bigger ball joint. For this one, it's quite a larger tool. So for this one, that's the separator there. Comes with all these different attachments so you get the right size. I want to get it under the rubber because I don't want to damage the rubber. That's in place. And we just do this bad boy up. Just go pop any second. Hope. And there you go. And that's out. Mind your toes. Okay, so the reason we're taking this all off is because we have to pull these axle shafts out of the transmission. So that's all free. I'm going to lift this all up and pull it out. There we go. Carefully tap this part of the this end of the CV joint that way, so the axle falls inwards. Don't have to take anything further out, but we want to pop it out of here and then pop it out of the transmission. For that, I'm using to start off with, a rubber mallet, just to sort of get us going. So that's most of the movement taken care of. I don't need to hit it hard now. And it might come out by hand. No such luck. So I'm using a piece of tool steel, that's pretty much what it is, and the hammer, just to gently, I'm not hitting it hard. You might have to depending on the condition of yours, but there we go. And that is now free. Now this can come out from the transmission side, which is right here. Here's the free drive shaft, and it's just got to come out of the transmission. I'm going to probably get under there and pry it, so let's go under there quickly. And I have just enough room to get up under here. I want to get to this bit. Okay, I'm just going to gently try and pop it out. bit of bite on it. Like that. Let's just pop you there somewhere. Let's see if I can pop it out. There we go. That's free. Sometimes these can be harder than others. There we go, it's fully out now. Don't forget to drain the transmission oil, otherwise you'll be getting covered in oil right now. Now that's the left-hand side of the car. I've already done the right. It's pretty much the same, it's just got a longer axle and it's got, you might be able to see it there, it's got a like a drive shaft hoop or an axle shaft hoop type thing on it that bolts to those bolts there on the engine. Just whip those out and that comes out just the same. Okay, so these two bolts here, I'm on the left hand side of the car. These two bolts here at the bottom, those two there, and that one where there's a socket on, they've got to come out because they're actually two little mounts. I'm going to whip out the mounts from under the cross member there, pull those mounts out completely so they're out the way, and then basically undo all the mounts that hold the transmission. There's another one at the back and another one at the top. Then I'm going to start disconnecting all the stuff off the engine. Okay, so those mounts are gone. Just a couple of bolts, two on the transmission for each mount and then two underneath. Just be advised on this hole here and this hole here for the mounts, I had to use a non-impact socket because it wouldn't fit. So whilst I'm under here, I'm just going to whip out some of the transmission bolts, and you can see where the transmission mates to the engine. Follow that line there. I've popped off the little dust cover that normally sits there. Right, so with the battery and intake removed, we're able to get down and remove this mount that was bolted here. And just light on the situation. It bolted through here and onto these two bolts here, so that mount's moved. We're actually going to replace this mount here because it's, I don't know if you can see it, but it's torn to shit and it's banging around all over the place. So that's that done. I've removed the gear linkages. They're very simple. It's just a clip on top. You pull that out, take the washer off. These pop off, and then towards the back, there's just two 10mm retaining bolts for each linkage. Just pop those out, and then you can slide the linkage out and up and out the way. We popped off the slave cylinder here, just two bolts, right there, those two bolts, so just so it's out the way. What I'm going to do now is just take off this wiring loom. So there's a wire that comes down to the side of the transmission, and then if you follow that back, there's a couple of plugs. We want to make sure that they're unplugged and off the trans, so when we move it we don't break any wires. So there's a couple of clips there, pop those out. One of the more difficult things was removing the rear mount, or the bolts for the rear mount. And it's probably quite hard to see. Alright, so there's 8 bolts around the transmission that you want to take out. One of them is a starter motor bolt, which you need some extensions to get to. If you can't get to it, you'll have to take the intake off. But we've got the flywheel off, and we've had it skimmed. There it is there, looking nice and fresh. New pressure plate. And the transmission does sit nicely up in this little hole here in the on the left side wheel. So more than enough room to swap out the clutch. And if you have a look up there, we've got the new pressure release bearing, and just about to put in the, what's that? Oh, yeah.
Bearing puller. I'm hoping there's enough room.
Just about to pull out the pilot bush. And there it is.
Absolutely worn out.
So there is enough room without taking the subframe down to get everything, get it all out. You could probably even comfortably put a new main seal in, rear main, without too many issues. So save you a couple of hours, no doubt.
Done. That's it.
Heaps of room, mate. So just with a pilot bushing, just gently tap it in, don't put any major force onto it because you don't want to deform it. And when you're installing your pressure release bearing, make sure that you do put grease on all the contact points or some sort of anti-seize grease. You'll probably find that it's pretty rusty and nasty up there, so make sure it's all clean first. Right, we need a flywheel and some Loctite.
Right,
So a bolt, just to hold it.
that's going to be somewhere around about there. So wherever that bolt goes in, behind your picture liner, there it is.
Right, so this is about to go back in. We just need to know the torque settings for the bolts. For this particular model, it's 90 foot-pounds for the flywheel bolts and 20 foot-pounds for the pressure plate.
One, two, three.
And just when you're doing these up, just do them in a star pattern, so you're not putting all pressure onto just one bolt or one section. So
It keeps the pressure even on the crankshaft. And, is that still on?
yeah.
Little tip. Whenever you use a torque wrench, take the torque back off it straight away. Because the longer you leave the torque setting on it, the more inaccurate it will be.
We've had problems like that before, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
With inaccurate torque wrenches and destroying the front end of my Mercedes. We won't go there though. Alright guys, we're just about to put the pressure plate on. We have to put the clutch on first obviously and line it all up, but just before you put it together, this is a brand new pressure plate, but make sure you do clean it all off with some brake cleaner or some sort of degreaser, as it is covered in sort of like an oil protective layer, so you want to just get that junk off.
There you go.
Clean!
When you're putting a new clutch in, the stepped side of the clutch goes inside the pressure plate, the flat side goes against the flywheel. If you get them wrong, it won't disengage, it will lock up and stay locked up.
Lovely. And also it does say on there
Flywheel
the
side.
orientation, so
Yeah.
if you can't get that right, just read on the clutch plate. Most clutch plates will have it on there. Cool, so we're just going to line that up.
Another tip, when you're putting new clutches in, don't put any lubricant on the fingers, because you want the release bearing.
Sorry, so just trying to hold back.
You want the release bearing to spin on the bearing, not spin on the fingers of the clutch, because it will wear them out really quickly.
Okay, so don't lube your fingers first, okay?
It's lined up with the edge of the pressure plate all the way around. That's it, ready to go in.
Let's do this. What are you after?
10mm socket.
Have you lost a 10mm socket?
It's not on the rack. You used it last. Where is it?
I didn't use it last.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows?
Where is it?
This is a pretty common problem.
Torque setting.
20 foot-pound. Once you've got your flywheel on, pressure plate on, and your new bearing in, and the pilot bushing, go ahead and slide the transmission back up into its hole. We've done that, and we just use a couple of bolts on either side to help wind the transmission back into its spot. Chucked a couple of bolts in at the top, and we've put the slave cylinder back on. And we're just going to quickly change this top mount here because it's absolutely shagged. So we'll put a new one of these in. And then we're going to test the clutch, make sure the clutch is working, and from there put everything back together. That mount is proper dead. Right, to get to this starter motor bolt, there's only one, which is just under the intake here, which is a bit of a pain to get to. You need a sort of an array of extensions and wobblies. So this is what we got. What we've got is a, what's that, like a 450mm extension, something like that. Going to a wobbly. by the end there, and that comes right down to here.
And you need to use half-inch drive because a 3/8 drive won't do it. A 3/8 drive set will not be able to undo this bolt.
Oh, not without destroying it, I guess.
It's just, they're way too tight for that.
So once that starter motor bolt's in, that's really the hardest fucking bolt. New mount's in, so just 2 bolts here, and then the one through the top of the mount. And we're just going to pop on the clip for the pipe for the slave cylinder. Then we'll be able to put the select cables back on. Right, so just winding in the last of the transmission bolts. The rear mount bolts are back in, so there's 4 of them, which I'm in the right spot. Roughly.
Is up there. You can see all that quite clearly.
Before I put the axles back in, I'm just going to pop the 2 mounts at the bottom here in first, so we've got a bit of room to play with. So, that first one's in. They should just slide into position. Should. Nothing really dropped, so that one is there, that there we go.
Yeah, just put all
that
the
mount.
bolts.
It's then and put the bolts in, boom.
Slide the bolts in before you do up the nuts on the underside.
Okay, the big long bolts go on the front mount, like so. And 2 short bolts go on the rear mount, like so.
Right,
go.
yours all in.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do yours up tight and then I'll whack these up. You got 17. Beautiful.
Done.
Right, let's pop CV back in right quick.
You got to put your wheel round the other way first.
Yeah, I have to somehow hold the camera, lift the wheel, put the CV in. Okay, move that over there. Move that up a little, just a touch. It's probably jammed in the hole a bit. There we go. Right, hang on. Let's just...
Right, just give it a nudge.
Alright, when you're putting in the CV, you can just use
That's it.
the CV itself, just to bang it in just gently, not hard, so you don't damage anything. If it's not going in,
There's something wrong.
yeah, pull it back out and just check the splines, and then try and line it up, pop it back in. So that's this side done. I'll pop this
If you come
end
round
of the
other
CV
side, hang on.
in here,
Just
but I'm
pop round
going
the other side.
to grease them up first. You can see the end of the CV joints are all rusty, so I'm going to clean them up a bit. Ready?
Yeah, go on. That's it. In. And our mounting brackets lined up. By the way, there is a difference in these bolts that you have to realise. There's 2 shoulder bolts which go at the bottom and a standard bolt that goes at the top.
Go. Steering's in. Yeah, I think I'm going to need to
Rover
clean it
and
up.
Honda were working together. No whacking furries.
Oh, when did you get that? Oh, it's got big sockets too. I had to go digging for the 36. It's got a 38, 36. Oh, if I knew that, I couldn't find the 36. It was buried under a bunch of Imperial ones. The more you know. Sounds better than most. Fucking hell. Right, and just before we put it back down, we are running the engine, making sure that the clutch engages nicely and the gearbox works. So basically on the top, once the gearbox is back in, just got to put your intake back in, your battery, and away you go. The car was misfiring terribly. After a very quick investigation, this is why. So we replaced the plugs, and now we got VTEC baby, runs 10 times better. Alright, that's the Honda done. Clutch in, running way better than it was with the new mount, and some new spark plugs as well, which were absolutely terrible, as you just saw in that footage. They were shocking. So that was actually contributing to the engine moving, which has failed the mounts. So yeah, you can do the transmission without taking out the subframe. And don't forget, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to get notifications. See you later.